Hi there, my name is Marion. I'm a business strategy consultant at Art Infographic, and this is our fifth presentation in the series called Breaking the Small Business Mindset. And first up, we've got an interesting slide that we're working with today. But yes, we are working with Japanese frameworks and strategies, ones that I use in my business today, and ones that I'd recommend that you look at for your business, because these are frameworks that we've used to build businesses from the ground up, and it's a very successful model, a good one to look at. And then also, if you do decide to work with me as your strategy consultant, it also gives you an idea of the kind of structures we have in our business and how we approach things. And just so that you're comfortable and you understand how we operate, we run our business like a small business, but we have got our sights on growing quite big ultimately. So we have these strategies and frameworks that we use in our company from day one with all of our staff, whether they're CEO or even our suppliers, even our external customers. So just to give you a feel for our culture and how we operate, and also what we expect from you as a client, to see if you feel that you are a good fit to work with us. And if you're prepared to put in the time and the effort that's needed to establish the foundations in your business to allow it to become profitable and successful. So today we're starting out with financial literacy. This is really a very big section, and I don't think we're actually going to cover it today because I have other programs that work with financial literacy. I have a personal finance program that I ask clients to do. It's basically a required program for them to do, and it's so that they can get a really good handle on their personal finances and slot it into whichever systems they've already got in place, and just build their financial acumen and their feeling of security and that with their personal finance. And then once they just feel a lot more that they've got a handle on their personal finance, it's easier for them, especially small businesses and entrepreneurs, to be able to separate their personal finances from their business finances, which is a very common issue that happens with small businesses. There's this it's for various reasons. The banks are very much a big reason for this, because they'll only allow you, in my country for instance, they'll only allow you to have a business bank account once you have a certain turnover, and there's all these kind of red tape and stuff involved in it. And so businesses start out with using their personal bank account as their business bank account, and it gets all mixed up, and then they have like a habit of having that because they're not really trained right from the onset of having a separate business and a separate personal account. So I do blame banks to a large degree for that, but I also do blame the schools for not teaching you how to manage that correctly, as well as managers and CEOs of companies of not teaching their staff how to do this type of stuff. So if at some stage they decide to leave the company and they want to open up a business, that they know what they're doing. So yeah, there's a very big lack of education, a lack of experience, and it just seems much more practical to mix the personal and business finances in the beginning, because your expenses, whether it's putting petrol in the car or buying groceries, you aren't definitely in South Africa, you're not registered for tax until you really start having a large turnover in your business. So there's no reason really to separate the expenses because you're not having any tax benefits from any of it. And yeah, it just becomes a habit and it becomes a way of doing things, and it just gets all messed up. And it's a huge mistake. Don't get me wrong, it is a huge mistake. As much as it's understandable why it occurs, it shouldn't occur. And it's a really difficult way to manage the finances of your business. And as I've mentioned a few times before, the finances are really the backbone documentation in your business, because from there you can get your metrics, and from your metrics you can make your decisions on your business. So the sooner you can separate your personal and business finance, the better. And the better you can document it, also the better. But how do you do that? And that's really difficult for a lot of small businesses. So that's why I've created the personal finance program, and it's a requirement for clients to do that. And then from that, they can really start separating their personal finance, and kind of what's left is their business finance. And then they can start documenting their business finance much better and getting a much better handle on both of those aspects of their business as they go forward. And then this incremental improvement that happens, this continuous improvement, which we call Kaizen, which I covered in a previous video, and going back and then just improving it, but having that intention of separating the personal and business finance, and intentionally going and doing it. And as I say, it's kind of difficult. I mean, it all makes common sense to separate them, but how do you do that? If the finances are already enmeshed in each other, how do you separate them? Or if you're a completely startup business and you're unable to get a separate account for your business stuff, or just because your daily expenses are really, as a little bit of money comes in for your business, you spend that on some personal stuff, and then along the line you might need to buy some more of your product, and then it's kind of difficult to separate the two. I've got a program for it. It's a personal finance program. It's very affordable, and I'd highly recommend it. Right, but it is important that you do it, that you become intentional about it and have a plan for doing it. Understandably, the personal and business finances might get mixed up in the first 3 years. Again, saying that it's typical that the break-even point is reached around about the 3rd year mark. But after that, you definitely need to separate the two. You have to reach break even. You must know where your break even is. And the minute that you are past your break even, you do need to separate those accounts and start running them separately. There's so many reasons for that, but I'm not going to go into it. It needs to be done. All right. All right, so the need for organization is something that we've covered before, and I would go back to some of those presentations and just realize the seriousness of not having a proper organizational chart. You can also go back to my video that talks about how to identify your target market and how the organizational chart fits into that. So you do need to determine an ideal organizational chart for your business. And I can say, if you've got it in your mind and you're only going to have a handful of staff members and you don't think you're really ready for a proper organizational chart, you are really shooting yourself in the foot, because a business, in order for it to be profitable, you need to have various passive income streams, and each of those departments would need to be managed and have kind of relationships, and you really need to plot it out visually. And I can assure you that whatever shape your business is in right now, what is the purpose of having a business if you're not going to be an improved business in a year's time, or in 3 years, or 5 years, or 10 years? And what I'm suggesting is, when we're looking at a previous concept called push and curry, where you start off with a long-term goal, you know, that the push and curry is really about a 1 year or 5 year goal. And in my case, when you work with me, we work on 10-year goals as well. So that is where you're starting out with your organizational chart, is to put together your ideal chart of what it will look like in 10 years' time. And then downscale it for a 5-year organizational chart, and then downscale it again into annual organizational charts. And once you actually start doing that exercise and doing it visually and putting it down, you'll realize that there are so many opportunities you would have left on the table if you had just kept it in your head. You need to have something visual. And I'm not just saying this as in, like, you know, woohoo. It's not like that. It's this whole visualization and doing a vision board and all of that is not, it's not some crazy idea that, you know, now as small businesses need to be creative and kind of do something and figure out our vision by cutting out pictures out of a magazine, and, you know, it's like, it's all a bit woohoo. It's not. It's not. If you speak to the top executives of very large corporations, they themselves go and do a visual of their org chart. They themselves go and put together vision boards. They're very active on it, in fact. If you go and you have those conversations, and I can tell you that from experience, I've had conversations with some pretty rich, pretty powerful people. One of the first things they say is you need to put together a decent vision board and figure it out where you're heading with your business and what your personal goals are in that business. Like, this is not something that it's like, oh, I can put it aside and do it another day. It's like one of the fundamental exercises that you need to do if you intend to be successful on any level. So you do need an org chart. Whether you like it or not, you need to have one, and it needs to be an ideal vision. And even if in your ideal vision you're going to have 2 or 3 staff members, then that's also fine. But you need to put it out visually and figure out how it is that you and maybe 2 or 3 staff members intend to make enough money that your business is going to survive. In my experience, a business really should work on about 6 staff members with 1 leader, ideally, as a minimum, just because there's so much to be done in the, not only the operations of the business, but having the business run successfully and all the departments looked after correctly. So, but I mean, that's up to you. That's my experience. It's what I've studied. It's how I understand the ideal number of staff members in a business. And having looked at the military, having looked at other businesses, having worked in very successful businesses, those are kind of the numbers that seem to work with departments, for instance, in larger corporations or in running small businesses. But I do understand that as an entrepreneur or a small business owner that maybe hasn't managed staff before, that a complement of 6 people might seem like, it might seem a bit overwhelming. It might seem like a lot to work through. And again, from experience, I've had it where I've hired 3 staff members and they caused so much trouble in the company that it became a lot of work to kind of manage them, and I didn't get to a point where I could grow to a point of 6 staff members. And I learned a lot through that, and it came down to my leadership and the training and information that I had for the staff, and also hiring the wrong staff. So I've learned my lessons through it. So I'm not saying that I've got the perfect example for you, but I have seen it where it has worked and what needs to be in place in order for it to work properly. So, you know, obviously with my consultations and programs, we work according to your personality and according to where your business is at and where your skill levels are. And we take it one step at a time. We don't have to hire all 6 staff members all at the same time. You know, this can be and our relationship that we develop is a 10-year relationship. So it can be over a period of 10 years that you can build your team to be the ideal sized team. But again, this is about kind of planting the seed and planning for it, and you know, really just planning for it. And so that's why with the organizational chart, or what's called an org chart, you're planning for it. You put together one that's the ideal, what the ideal will look like in 10 years' time. And that can be as big or small as you want it to be. My one for my 10-year plan is 41 staff members and many, many regional offices. So, you know, I've got a much bigger plan of how to do it. But that is because I've done smaller businesses in the past and I feel I'm ready to do a bigger business. So it's all up to you and what you're comfortable with, but you do need a clear org chart. You need to have that vision and you need to make it a visual thing, like actually plot it out, preferably on a piece of paper and put it up somewhere. And then the KPIs that go with that, that's called key performance indicators. That's really saying, and the ideal is to have 5 key performance indicators per role. And those each need to be kind of things that will move the needle for the company. So try not to focus too much on nitty-gritty operational things, and rather say, okay, so I need a marketing manager, and that marketing manager, one of the KPIs would be to develop a repeatable email sales funnel. And, you know, that can be one of the KPIs. So you really need to think through the KPIs very carefully so that you can focus on the 5 top ones per role, and you can't really make it too much of a responsibility. You can't say develop and manage a sales email funnel. You can't have that as one point. One point would be to design email funnels that are repeatable and they can be refined and improved. And the next point would be to manage the email funnel, because each one is really a job in itself. So don't try and lump too many duties into one KPI. Like, you should have one duty per KPI. So if you had a manager come in and he had a to-do list and he only had one thing to do on his list, what would that be? You know, and choose the top 5 things and really get them to focus on that. You can always change KPIs. You can have different ones for each quarter. for instance. And that's a good idea, especially for a small business that might be doing experimenting, might be changing things up a bit and whatever. So there's nothing wrong with having 4 sets of KPIs, but to be fair to the staff member, you'd want them to have the most simple, most effective KPIs going for 3 months at a minimum. So they really get a handle on it before you change KPIs out for other ones. And again, it's a very good idea to kind of repeat them. So if you've got 4 different sets of KPIs for a year, then the following year you should kind of stick to the same 4 sets of KPIs, because it will allow your manager to repeat the tasks and become very skilled in certain areas of his department, his or her department. So repeating, refining and improving as you go along. All right, and then again, the importance of structured campaigns and promotional calendars, because that slots in with how you manage the time of your staff, how you manage your time, how you manage your scrums, your sprints, your Kaizen blitzes. It's when you've got the calendars are a really good place to start. So working out a marketing campaign calendar for the year. I would recommend 4 marketing campaigns per year. And then you can then slot in the Kaizen blitzes into that, and you can slot in the sprints and the scrums into that, and then your KPIs also, kind of follow in on that. So a really good place to start is your marketing campaign calendar, and then promotional calendar would be things like discounts and samples, and perhaps if you want to do a trade show or something along those lines. So the marketing campaigns are sort of more marketing, as I talked about marketing in the previous presentation, with a little bit of sales. That's the kind of the call to action, and then you get your sales from that. The promotional calendar is pretty much totally about sales and advertising, and you need to have those calendars in place. Right, so back to the Japanese frameworks and strategies. There's one called 5S. So the S's actually stand for Japanese words. I'll go into that in the next slide. But in the English words, we've got these ones of sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. So a lot of these terms we've now kind of talked about in the other presentations. Is you need to sort your tasks, you need to sort out who owns the different departments, and you're going to know that when you do your org chart and when you do your KPIs, and when you sort out your leadership in your company. So you need to identify these roles and responsibilities and sort everything. And then set in order is where you basically train staff, and you have procedures, and you actually do the operations of your business. And then shine is that the whole thing of going back, reiterating and improving. And then most importantly is standardizing that. So once you've got the operations and you've got the procedures, you start looking at things like operations manuals, SOPs, having repeatable routines, repeatable KPIs. Like I mentioned with the KPIs, even if you've got 4 sets of KPIs for a department in a year, then the following year you repeat those again, and the year after that you repeat that again. And then you put it down in writing and you standardize it. And then sustain is obviously, it's actually the reward for doing all of these stuff, that your business becomes a sustainable business. So in the Japanese terms, these are all the Japanese terms, And it's really about creating order, the love of order, cleanliness, and that goes for, so if you can imagine where I said like your business is like a studio and people come in on a daily basis and kind of spend some time with you and see what's what, then that it's the same thing of cleanliness of your environment. It's also your digital cleanliness. Do your links on your website work? If people get sent down a certain funnel, does that funnel make sense? Are you doing cleanliness? And going back to the point of Kaizen, where you use the resources you have and not being such a consumer and just like, oh, I need a new something, and then buying that online the minute that you need it. Like, try and see what you've got in your environment that you can reuse, that you can repurpose, and really kind of streamline everything and keep everything as clean and in order as possible. So almost like OCD, just really just being hyper focused on cleanliness and organization of even your thought patterns, not having like crazy thought patterns in that. Like, if that means that you need time to go and sit down, like that's what I do in Flex Week, is that I do a lot of strategizing in Flex Week. But even on a daily basis, I do meditation, I do breathing exercises, I also sit and talk things out so that any anxiety levels that I can work through challenges and problems that have come up during the day and work through it and just be able to organize my thoughts much better. Maybe some of you like to journal. Maybe you like to take time to do a hobby and just let your thoughts get more organized. But it's this whole organized environment and organized thinking process and having these disciplines, but very much about standardizing your routines and repeating stuff. So that makes such a huge difference in business. I've got a lot of anecdotal stories I can tell you about that, but that repetition, it makes you reliable, and people trust things that are reliable. So, like I've mentioned before, every Friday I study corporate finance for 4 hours a day, and so for 4 hours on a Friday. And my clients know that, my staff knows that, okay, everybody knows that I'm studying corporate finance on a Friday morning between 9 o'clock and 1 o'clock every Friday. They get to know, to trust me, because I am reliable on certain things. Well, on everything, if I can be. All right, so understanding debt and profitability. And this is going back, so this is actually a bugbear of mine, and it really does upset me, is this over-reliance on a spouse's income. So the spouse, this is in particular relevance to my female clientele. They'll have a husband, and I agree, I do get the whole trad wife situation. I do get that. And, not every woman needs to be an independent businesswoman, and I get that as well. And I really appreciate the husbands in the world that have got well-paying jobs and they can support their wives in a certain way. And perhaps they give them allowances, or perhaps they help them set up their business, and they kind of support their wife or their girlfriend financially. And I really don't have an issue with that. Where I do have an issue is where that wife or girlfriend, and it could be with males, but in my experience, in my clientele, it's mainly females that I've experienced this, so I'm going to use that gender. But where they come along and try and pretend that they are independent, try and pretend that they're running a successful and profitable business, but they're not able to pay their bills. They're actually relying on their husband to pay their bills. Like, don't pretend. If that is the situation, then you've got a hobby that kind of pays some money and it keeps you interested, and you kind of have something that your husband supports you on, but it's not a profitable, successful business. And at some point, you need to make a decision. Are you going to run a profitable, successful business, which is going to require more time and actually, working as if you're working a 9 to 5 or more? Or are you going to continue having a very relaxed lifestyle where you have a partner who's kind of supporting your little income stream, but it's not a successful business? Like, you actually need to kind of draw a line and decide which one are you going to embrace and admit that that is what you want to do. So if you want to be a successful business owner, and there's a huge amount of independence that you need to embrace with that. You kind of need to become quite adult about running your business, understanding the numbers, understanding where your business is headed, what kind of revenue you need to bring in, bringing in help that will help you create a successful business, all of that type of stuff. Or if you're going to run it as something that is just really something that is very creative, a creative project for yourself, and whether it makes money or doesn't make money is irrelevant, as long as it doesn't cost anybody money, kind of thing. So, I've been in both situations. So I get it. And also, you don't expect for your business to be generating profits in the first years. So you might move from the one side where you've got a partner or you've got credit cards or whatever that's supporting your business, and then when it breaks even, you really want to go the route of having a successful business and making profits in it. You can, it might be necessary that you have to set up your business in that way, that you're reliant on outside income to start off with. And that's also okay. But you just need to be clear, like, which direction are you actually going to be taking the business at some point, right? And with that, you probably, when you do a bit more research in that, you'll realize that debt is not necessarily bad. And having debt and leveraging debt is one of the more powerful things that you as a business owner can do. It will see you through dips in the market and situations that come up. I mean, business, it would be great if we could just say, okay, week 1 we need to do this, week 2 we need to do this, week 3 we need to do this, and kind of stick with it. And it's really good to have a plan for that. But things happen, life happens in between, and it's always good to have alternative sources of income and having safety nets, and debt can give that to you. Again, I can teach you how to leverage debt. I know quite a bit about it. I need to kind of refresh on a lot of information about that, and I have some meetings with some banks that I'm heading to in the near future, and I'll start getting a little bit more clued up with the debt environment in the near future. But I've had quite a lot of experience. I've gone through the 2008 financial crisis, and at the time we had a lot of luxury items. We had quad bikes and boats, a number of properties, a number of businesses. But 2008 was quite a long time ago. So I really need to refresh my knowledge on debt, but I do kind of keep up to date as best I can. But at the same time, you're also welcome to contact me, and I can do consultations and and help you with that. And part of the personal finance program that I was talking about earlier on, there's one entire question that is based on debt and leveraging debt better. So yes, we've got another framework that's called Kanban. And the way that Kanban works is it comes from manufacturing. And if I can give you an example, it's really about time management and process management. It's more about project management. If you can imagine like a Gantt chart with those sort of colorful stripes, and then you've got a project that's 3 weeks, and that will be a green stripe that marks, you know, when the project starts and when it ends, and that's 3 weeks. And then underneath that, there'll be another project that's maybe 2 days, and it will be a yellow line, and it covers 2 days. So that's called a Gantt chart. So the Kanban system it's used in Japanese manufacturing. And the way that it works is there's the simplest version of it is called the 3-bin system. And so if you are on the floor, on the factory floor, and you have a bin and it's got 20 nuts in it, 20 nuts and bolts, right? When you run low on those nuts and bolts, there's a card, and that card is called a Kanban that gets put onto that box. Then there's somebody who goes and manages all these boxes, and then the boxes that have the cards on it get sent to a warehouse. The actual box gets sent to the warehouse. The warehouse replaces it with a box that's got 20 nuts and bolts in it, and the warehouse then takes the empty box. The empty box then gets sent to the supplier, and the supplier then fills it up with 20 nuts and bolts. So it's this 3-bin system, and it's got cards that go with it, and it's called the Kanban system. These Kanban cards indicate things that are out of stock. And the reason why they call it just in time is it allows for products to be produced at the speed of demand. So people aren't producing ahead of time, and they're not falling behind. They're staying on time all the time. It's as stuff is running out, it's being replaced. And a really good way of understanding this, if you don't know the sort of manufacturing environment, is if you look at a supermarket generally runs in a just-in-time management system. And that's, you know, they understand that this is the trend of demands of our products, and we'll get that product in at the same rate of the demand. So that's why sometimes you'll find like empty shelves, is because if there's a problem at the supplier, then that kind of messes things up, because then the warehouse doesn't get it, and then from the warehouse to the shopping center, there's a problem, and then the shelves land up empty, and that can happen quite quickly because they run on a just-in-time system. So how does this affect, for instance, if you don't have a factory? Well, you can do this as a writer, for instance, and I'll give that example, I think, in the next slide. So yes, exactly here. So it says, for instance, nowadays a writer will produce books, keynote speeches, blog posts, tweets, and answer emails. The question is, at the present time, right now, how can the person using the process know whether they are doing what is needed for customers right now, or whether they are working ahead on something that is not important, or lagging behind on something that is critical? So that's where this Kanban system comes in, and the Gantt chart system comes in. So it's really critical for a business to have a project management system. And again, a lot of small business owners kind of give me a lot of pushback with this, because they haven't used a project management system before. They haven't been trained on it. They haven't learned it. And, you know, they kind of have it in their head that it's a lot of data capturing and it requires an entirely different role to be filled, and they just don't have time for that. They don't even have time to go through their to-do list, never mind to manage their projects properly. But it's project management is a very big part of how I run my business, and it makes a world of difference when you get it right and you start putting it in place. Again, the best is to find a project management system. We use Airtable, for instance. Find one and try it out and experiment and make mistakes and get it wrong and get frustrated and delete pages and do it again and make more mistakes and delete again. I'm in that process. I'm in that process because I'm trying to improve project management for my own business. And it's I haven't done it in a while, so I'm having to redo things and go back and kind of fix it and shine it up. Like, you know, we were talking about the 5 S's, is you need to shine it. You know, go and polish it, make it better. But you do need a project management system. You do. And especially if you are over involved in your operations of your business, which many of you are. So, another problem is inadequate market research. And again, this is the lacking of understanding your target market. I think I've spoken about this kind of ad nauseum, but if the penny hasn't dropped yet, go and watch that video on how to identify your target market. If you need help, I've got a program called the MMA, and when you go through those questionnaires, it will help you identify your target market. It's really important that you understand that for your decision making. Again, going back to that whole idea of marketing and the studio and designing it and having people come and be aligned with your message and what you have to offer and all of that. You kind of have to do them in tandem, where you go with your personality, what you want to give to the world, and send it out to the world and kind of attract your tribe and your people towards you. But at the same time, you need to know what it is that your tribe is looking for, what it is that resonates with them. So you've got to understand it both from your side of designing something that you want and appreciate and want to put out in the world, but at the same time, really leveraging that by understanding your client base and seeing how you can attract them. So going back to the studio situation, let's say you've got a studio, it's all in pastel colors, got lots of flowers and stuff. When you start understanding the type of target market that would come to a studio such as yours, you might then realize that that kind of target market might be maybe an elderly lady, or it might be a young student type that likes that kind of aesthetic and atmosphere. And, you know, those kind of people will have different tastes in music and food and shopping preferences, in the way that they communicate, in the way that they talk, and what kind of messages resonate with them. You know, so you need to kind of identify those kind of customer segments within what you are offering out into the world. But again, I do talk ad nauseum about this, and if you haven't done it and you haven't figured it out yet, I don't know if there's help for you, to be honest with you. Like, if you need help with it, give me a call. We can do some consultations. I do think very creatively. I think out of the box. I can determine, as an objective observer, I can determine maybe where your roadblocks are and help you kind of get get you out of that through visualization and through little exercises, creative exercises, and move past that roadblock for you. But you do need to identify your target market. Okay, so nemawashi means laying the groundwork. It also means tying the roots. And in Japan, if they're wanting to move a tree, they want the tree to survive. There's not like in the Western culture where we chop down trees. They try and move the entire tree. So what they do is they dig around the roots and then they chop some of the larger roots, allowing for smaller roots to grow in the root bundle, as it were, that was left under the tree. So they chop the larger roots and encourage smaller roots to grow. And then they move the entire tree and then they go and plant it, and then the tree has a better chance of growing. So they have this culture of nemawashi, which is, it's actually kind of counterintuitive, because the way that it works is that if you have leaders that are coming to a big meeting, then before having the meeting, the founder or owner of the business goes through to each of those leaders and has a meeting with them one-on-one, where they talk and ask their opinions and tell them what's going to be brought up in the meeting and all of that. So in the larger and medium corporations that I've worked in South Africa, a similar process happens in the best companies, and that is where an agenda of a meeting gets sent out and the participants get asked for feedback prior to the meeting. And that can be a much quicker way of doing it. But in Japan, it's a face-to-face meeting. You go to each person and you have a face-to-face. If you don't do that in Japan and the leaders come together for a meeting, people can actually cause disruption and put a block on decision making because they feel disrespected by the fact that they didn't have a meeting prior to the main meeting. So it's very much a cultural thing of respect. And as I say, as an alternative in the Western culture, an alternative is to send out the agenda prior to the time and to ask for feedback, or even to pick up a phone and say, this is what we're discussing, I'd like to get your feedback from it. But that's not really what nemawashi actually means, because it has kind of morphed over the years to mean instant decision making, it's actually instant implementation of decisions. So when a decision gets made, that you go with it, that you run with it immediately. So there's a lot of procrastination that tends to happen, and second guessing that happens in small business mindsets. And this whole concept of speed and doing business with speed. So taking decisions and making slow decisions, but as soon as a decision is made, implementing it quickly. So many years back, I was taught the concept of hire slowly, fire quickly. And I was taught that this concept doesn't actually necessarily pertain to hiring people and firing them, although it does, but it's more about adopting ideas and letting go of ideas that don't work. Like be slow to adopt new ideas and to get them right and put them in place. But if something's not working, cut it out immediately and move on. And this is kind of similar in that take your time to make the decisions. Have consensus-based decisions. I think previously I mentioned consensus-based when we were talking about Kaizen. And that's the point, is that getting everybody in the leadership level, not necessarily everybody in your company, but in the leadership level, to make a decision. And then when that decision is made, it's applied immediately. All right, I think this is going to be the last section that we're going to cover, but the resistance to technology and the adoption of new technologies. So this, what I can say is that on one level, I've found that new business owners are quite open to new products that are coming out that can assist them with some of their work. But I also do find them behind on a lot of stuff. And at the end of the day, if you are not using MailChimp to do your email newsletters, or if you haven't explored something like HubSpot, even though that's a paid thing, there are certain apps and certain technologies that have been around for a long time. And if you haven't adopted them, then you're behind the times. So sometimes I look at business owners and I'm like, wow, you are still in 1980. Like, it's about time that you step up and adopt some new technology in your business practices. And in particular, when it comes to automating, you need to automate much quicker than what you are. You are doing things too manually for too long. Like, do it manually until you know that it's working, and then automate it. Don't get stuck in the habit of doing it manually when there are things that can automate it and you can move from there. Automate it and have a staff member manage it and keep an eye on it. But your bandwidth, your brain power should be based on strategic thinking and strategy work and creating the foundational stuff that you need for your business that we've covered before, rather than writing newsletters and doing manual newsletter funnels, as an example. That, if it can be automated, automate it. And in there, we've got a term called monosukuri, and that means craftsmanship. It also means produce or manufacture. And as you may be very well aware, in Japan, it's about quality, it's about precision, it's about doing things at the highest possible level. And you might know of like these ceramic painters, these ceramic artists that practice painting one leaf over and over again until they really perfect it. Like they become so focused on the detail and getting it right and delivering it at supreme quality. And you know, you get these wood carvers, and it's really supreme quality, and they practice it day in and day out, and that whole thing is a really good concept to bring into your business of doing good quality. Rather take things slower than like just getting it done and it's sloppy and it's all over the place. Like, I actually don't enjoy working with people like that. Like take your time and do it properly, and try and do it as properly as possible the first time around. I mean, we've already accounted for doing improvements, refining, polishing and shining. That's all in the process. So if it's not perfect, it's not the end of the world. You know, doing experiments, moving with speed, trying out different things, that's all important. But when you do it, you need to do it intentionally and do it as perfectly as possible. Not for the sake of getting the job done and it's done, but the sake of doing it as properly as possible. All right, so we'll go on to the next thing of poor time management in our next presentation. I've got a lot that I can help you out with this. Again, I've got programs, I do personal consultations, and I help businesses with all of these aspects. And don't expect to get it right the first time, and you don't have to do all of these things straight away. try and incorporate as many of them as you can into your daily practices, and it's a whole thing of incremental improvements on a daily basis, and you can get better and better with practice. Practice makes perfect. But hopefully up to this point I've given you some guidelines of how you can approach your business and how you can put these things in place to kind of take your business to a better level. So thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and I look forward to having you on the next presentation.